Beloved soul, pause for a moment and settle into this message. Take a slow breath and really arrive here. What you are reading did not land in your life by accident. It feels quiet, but something deeper is moving around you right now. On the surface, nothing may look different. Yet beneath it all, a shift has already begun. You may not fully understand it yet, but something unseen is rearranging your situation in ways your eyes cannot track. And in this silence, a truth is forming. Stay with this for a moment, don't rush past it. When you finally stop chasing, something inside the entire connection changes. You did not argue, you did not plead, you did not send another message trying to fix what was already one-sided. You simply stopped. And in that simple act, something powerful was released. The energy you once kept flowing outward has now been pulled back. And that withdrawal is not loud, it is not dramatic, but it is deeply noticeable on a subtle, emotional level. The space you used to fill is now empty, and that emptiness speaks louder than words ever could. And here is what begins to happen next. The person who once felt secure in your constant presence starts to feel a strange shift. Not because of conflict, but because of absence. The warmth you used to give, the steady attention, the emotional effort you carried so naturally, all of it is no longer being supplied. And now they are sitting in a space you used to fill without even thinking about it. This is where imbalance becomes visible. Before, you were the one holding the connection together through effort, care, and emotional consistency. They were receiving more than they were giving, even if they never fully realized it. That kind of pattern creates comfort, but it does not create real balance. It becomes convenience disguised as connection. And now, with your energy pulled back, that comfort is disrupted. Stay with this thought because it matters. When one person carries everything, the other never has to fully step forward. But once the effort stops, the truth of the structure begins to show itself clearly. Now the silence starts doing something very different. It is no longer about what you said or did. It is about what is no longer happening. And that absence creates awareness. The mind begins to replay old moments, searching for what changed. Questions start forming where certainty used to exist. They notice the gap you left behind, and that gap becomes impossible to ignore. The emotional space that was once filled by your presence now feels unfamiliar. And in that unfamiliarity, reflection begins. Not because you forced it, but because silence forces honesty. When constant access is removed, people are no longer able to stay passive. They must now face what they actually contributed. Stay focused here, because this is where realization begins to form slowly, quietly, but powerfully. What was once taken for granted now becomes something they have to think about. And that shift changes the entire emotional tone of the connection. And finally, what gets revealed through your silence is not just their reaction, but their depth. Because absence shows what attention used to hide. Some people will feel the space and reflect on themselves with honesty. They will question their actions, their effort, and their emotional presence. Others will resist that discomfort and pull away even further. This is where maturity becomes visible without words. Real emotional strength does not panic in silence. It reflects within it. But avoidance tries to escape it. And this is the part many do not expect. Your stillness becomes the test, not for you, but for them. Stay with this final truth. When you stop chasing, you did not lose power. You reclaimed it. And what responds to your silence will reveal everything that words never could. They may withdraw even more to protect their pride, telling themselves that the connection was never as deep as it once felt when you were fully present. They might even convince themselves that they are unaffected, while quietly waiting to see if you return to your old patterns again. But what they don't realize is that something has already shifted for good. This response, beloved, becomes one of the clearest signals life can give you about whether someone is truly capable of meeting you in the kind of love you are being guided toward in this season. The fifth layer of this experience is the revealing of real emotional truth. Your steady presence may have been quietly sustaining feelings in them that were partly powered by your effort, your consistency, your emotional availability, rather than something fully grounded within themselves. But once your absence enters the space, that external support disappears. What remains is what is real, unfiltered, and unassisted. If their feelings are genuine, distance does not erase them. Instead, it deepens awareness. They begin to miss you not as a habit or comfort, but as a specific presence that cannot be replaced. They recognize your value in a way they did not pause to see before. But if the connection was built more on ease than depth, silence reveals that too. And yes, beloved, both outcomes bring clarity. Stay with this moment, because clarity, even when uncomfortable, always tells the truth that illusion hides. This silence is also working within you in ways that are just as important. It is not only about what they feel, but about what you are now returning to yourself. When your energy is no longer constantly flowing outward toward someone who is not fully meeting you, that energy begins to come back to you. And in that return, something quiet but powerful starts to repair. Space opens inside you again. God uses that space to restore what was drained, to realign your inner vision, and to strengthen what has been emotionally worn down over time. In stillness, you begin to see more clearly. The overthinking slows, the emotional noise softens, and what remains is a calmer sense of truth, of direction, of inner knowing. There is a sacred reminder in this. In quiet trust, strength returns. In rest, clarity forms. What once felt like emptiness begins to reveal itself as realignment. Beloved, this is where healing quietly begins again. Stay here mentally for a moment, because what is rebuilding inside you is far more important than what you thought you lost. This final layer reveals what is truly aligned with your life and what is not meant to continue. If a connection is not rooted in real alignment, your silence makes that truth visible without force, without conflict, without explanation. What cannot remain starts to loosen naturally when your energy is no longer feeding it. And when something ends in this way, it is not rejection or punishment. It is protection guiding you forward. It is life clearing space for something more aligned with your future. When you step back, the other person often enters an inner state of quiet unsettledness, even if they appear composed on the outside. It begins with confusion. The rhythm they were used to is gone, and they can feel it. Their mind starts looping through questions with no clear answers. What changed? Why does this feel different? Did I miss something important? That inner looping creates a discomfort they cannot easily silence. But the response that follows is not the same for everyone. It depends on who they are at their core. Some will reflect honestly and take responsibility inwardly. Others will resist the discomfort and retreat into avoidance or pride. And this becomes the real mirror. No words are needed. Stay with this truth, because silence reveals what attention was hiding. And what returns after silence always shows what was real all along. They begin to turn inward, instead of outward for answers. Their attention shifts from trying to understand you to trying to understand themselves within what happened. When the emotional shift becomes real, they do not immediately rush to protect their ego or build a version of events that keeps them completely blameless. Instead, something quieter starts to happen inside them. They start reviewing their own actions. How did they show up in this connection? How much effort did they actually give when things were still open and available? How honest were they about what they truly wanted? And how clearly did they express it in real time, instead of only thinking about it later? This kind of reflection carries a weight they may not have wanted to face before. It brings responsibility into focus. Not just what they might be losing now, but what they failed to nurture when it was still within reach. And from that place, their response becomes less reactive and more conscious. If there is real value in what existed between you, they will not move from panic or emptiness, but from awareness. Stay with this for a moment, because awareness changes everything. After you pray, after you surrender the outcome and release control into God's hands, there is still something many people struggle to understand. They expect instant clarity. They expect immediate movement, quick answers, and visible change right away. But life does not unfold like that. Heaven works in layers and in timing that the human mind cannot fully measure. Just like a seed placed into soil does not become a tree overnight, what is meant for your growth is also unfolding in stages. Nothing is wasted in this quiet space. Even when nothing looks different on the surface, something deeper is being formed beneath it. Do not mistake stillness for emptiness. In these unseen moments, God is working in ways you cannot yet trace. Working in them, shaping awareness, softening resistance, revealing truth step by step. Working in you, restoring emotional strength, rebuilding clarity, and preparing your heart so you are not overwhelmed when answers finally come. And working in the situation itself, quietly aligning what belongs and loosening what does not. Stay grounded here, because timing is not absence, it is preparation. There is also a deeper fear that often pulls people back into chasing, even when they know they should not. It is not just attachment, it is fear of what happens if this connection does not work out. Fear of ending up alone. Fear that this might have been the only chance, the only person, the only path forward. But those thoughts are not truth, they are pressure. They push the mind into scarcity and make the present moment feel heavier than it really is. When silence enters a connection, it exposes these fears very clearly. But clarity is not punishment, it is protection. It shows you where emotion was driving more than alignment. Scripture reminds us that there is an appointed time for what is meant for your life, and it will not arrive early, and it will not miss you either. Trust becomes the anchor in this season, not chasing, not forcing, not trying to control what is unfolding. And in that trust, fear begins to lose its grip. You are not being forgotten in silence, you are being guided through it. And what is meant for you will recognize you without struggle, without confusion, and without you having to chase it into place. Stay strong in that truth, because what is aligned will remain, and what is not will gently fall away. They begin to turn inward instead of outward, and this is where something deeper starts unfolding inside them. It is no longer about reacting to your silence, it becomes about understanding themselves within it. They start questioning their own role in what happened, not in a surface way, but in a way that quietly strips away excuses. No rushing to blame you, no quick story to protect their pride, no easy escape into denial. Instead, there is a slow and uncomfortable honesty rising. How did I show up? How much effort did I actually give when things were still open? Did I speak clearly, or did I assume things would just continue without needing real intention? These questions don't come with comfort, they come with weight. And that weight forces awareness. Because once the noise of your presence is gone, they can no longer avoid what they contributed or failed to contribute. They start seeing the connection differently, not as something that just happened to them, but something they were part of shaping through action or inaction. And in that space, accountability quietly enters. Not forced, not dramatic, just undeniable. Stay with this, because self-awareness changes the direction of everything. And then silence begins to do something even deeper. It stretches time in a way that cannot be controlled. What once felt automatic and familiar now feels unfamiliar and open-ended. They are no longer receiving the steady emotional rhythm they were used to, and that absence creates a different kind of awareness. At first it feels like confusion, like something is slightly off but not fully understood. Then it becomes reflection. The mind starts replaying moments that were once ignored or taken for granted. Not because someone is forcing it, but because the structure they relied on is no longer there to support passive thinking. This is where real realization begins to form. The silence is not empty. It is active. It is revealing patterns that were hidden inside routine comfort. And just like a seed buried in soil begins its work long before anything appears above the surface, this moment is also working quietly beneath what can be seen. Nothing is wasted here. Even what feels like stillness is actually movement in a deeper direction. Stay focused here, because what looks still is actually transforming everything underneath. But there is also a fear that rises in this space, and it becomes very loud in the quiet. The fear of losing something permanent, the fear that this was the only real connection, the only real chance, the only path that mattered. And when fear speaks, it often distorts perception. It makes the present feel final when it is not. It creates urgency where patience is needed, but silence has a way of exposing fear for what it is. It removes distraction and brings everything to the surface. And in that exposure, something important becomes possible. Either they grow through it, or they retreat from it. Either they face themselves honestly, or avoid what they feel. This is where clarity begins to separate from illusion, because what is meant for your life does not require force, panic, or constant chasing. It unfolds with alignment, not desperation. And what is not aligned cannot be held together by fear forever. Stay here for a moment, because not everything that feels urgent is meant for you. And finally, what this silence reveals is not only about them, but about direction. It shows what can grow and what cannot continue. If there is real depth, it does not disappear in absence. It becomes more conscious, more intentional, more grounded. If there is only surface attachment, silence exposes that too, without argument or explanation. And this is where your power quietly returns to you. Not in chasing, not in proving, but in no longer overgiving to what does not meet you halfway. Something inside you begins to reset. Your energy comes back into your own space. Your clarity sharpens. Your emotional vision becomes less clouded. And from that place, you no longer need to force answers, because answers begin to show themselves naturally through action, not words. What is real will move toward you without confusion. What is not will drift away without resistance. Stay strong in this understanding, because silence was never emptiness. It was revelation. And as this silence continues to unfold, something even more subtle begins to happen within them. It is not immediate, and it is not dramatic on the outside, but internally it becomes harder to ignore. The emotional space that was once filled by routine interaction with you starts to feel unfamiliar, almost unsettled. They may not admit it openly, but your absence begins to interrupt the patterns they were used to relying on. Small moments throughout their day begin to carry reminders. A thought here, a memory there, a pause where your presence used to be part of the rhythm. And this is where reflection deepens beyond surface thinking. Because now, it is not just about missing communication, it is about noticing the difference your presence actually made in their emotional landscape. Stay with this moment, because realization often begins quietly before it becomes undeniable. At the same time, their mind starts trying to rebuild control through logic. They attempt to explain the shift in ways that feel comfortable. Maybe they tell themselves it is temporary. Maybe they assume you will return to how things were. Or maybe they convince themselves that the distance is not meaningful at all. But beneath those thoughts, something else is still happening. Emotion does not fully settle just because logic tries to override it. The absence creates gaps that reasoning cannot completely fill. And those gaps are where awareness grows. Because when someone is no longer constantly receiving your attention, they are left with their own internal space to sit with what remains. And what remains is often the truth they did not pause long enough to see before. Not exaggerated, not emotional, just real. And this quiet confrontation with reality becomes the turning point where understanding starts to shift. But here is the deeper layer most people do not notice. Silence does not just reveal what they feel about you, it reveals how they handle emotional discomfort itself. Some people lean into reflection, even if it is uncomfortable. They begin to take responsibility, even if slowly. They think about their actions with more honesty than before. And from that place, their behavior can change in a meaningful direction. But others resist that discomfort entirely. They distract themselves. They minimize what they feel. They avoid looking too deeply because it requires emotional maturity they are not ready to face. And this difference matters more than anything said in words, because it shows who is capable of real emotional depth and who only engages when it feels easy and convenient. Stay focused here, because silence does not confuse truth, it reveals it. And while all of this is unfolding on their side, something equally important is happening within you. Your energy is no longer scattered in constant reaching, explaining, or hoping for response. It begins to return inward. And in that return, clarity starts to rebuild itself. You begin to see the situation without the emotional distortion of overinvestment. What once felt uncertain starts to look more defined. What once felt powerful over you begins to lose its grip. And slowly, you stop measuring your worth through someone else's reaction. This is where emotional independence quietly forms again, not through force, not through detachment techniques, but through natural withdrawal of energy from what does not fully meet you. Stay here for a second, because this is where inner balance starts coming back. And finally, what this entire silence teaches is timing and truth. Not everything reveals itself when you want it to. Some things only become visible when you stop interrupting the process with effort. If something is real, it does not collapse under stillness. It becomes clearer. It becomes more intentional. But if it was built on imbalance, silence exposes that foundation without needing conflict or explanation. And in that exposure, you gain something far more valuable than uncertainty. You gain clarity. You no longer have to guess. You no longer have to chase meaning. Because what is aligned will show itself through consistent action, not temporary emotion. And what is not aligned will naturally drift without resistance. Stay grounded in this truth, because silence was never absence. It was information revealing itself in its purest form. And as this silence stretches further, something even more undeniable begins to surface within them. It is not just thought anymore. It becomes feeling that they cannot fully regulate. The absence of your presence starts to reshape how ordinary moments feel. Things that once felt automatic now feel slightly different, almost incomplete. They may not openly acknowledge it, but internally there is a quiet comparison happening between before and now. Before there was access, consistency, emotional familiarity. Now there is space, uncertainty, and a kind of emptiness they did not expect to feel this strongly. And in that contrast, awareness deepens. Because human emotion often becomes clearer not in presence, but in absence. Stay with this, because what is missing begins to speak louder than what is present. At first, they may try to stabilize themselves by minimizing what is happening. They might tell themselves that everything is fine, that nothing has truly changed, that distance is normal. But the emotional system does not fully obey denial. There are moments when their guard drops, even briefly, and in those moments the reality slips through. A memory hits differently. A familiar habit reminds them of you. A silence in their day feels longer than it used to. And these small interruptions begin stacking quietly inside their awareness. This is where emotional truth begins to leak through resistance. Not in one dramatic realization, but in fragments that slowly build weight over time. And the more they try to ignore it, the more noticeable it becomes internally. Because what is real does not disappear just because it is avoided. It waits. And silence gives it space to return. And in this process, something very important becomes visible. How they respond when emotional comfort is no longer automatic. Some individuals begin to soften internally. They reflect without needing external pressure. They reconsider how they communicated, how they showed up, and what they may have assumed would always remain available. This reflection is quiet but meaningful, because it is no longer supported by convenience. It is supported by absence. But others struggle in this space. They feel discomfort and try to escape it quickly through distraction, pride, or emotional withdrawal. Instead of leaning inward, they move outward or away. And this difference is not small. It reveals emotional capacity. It reveals depth. It reveals readiness for something real versus something conditional. Stay present here, because silence does not create character, it exposes it. And while all of this unfolds on their side, your inner world begins to reorganize itself in a very different way. The emotional tension that came from constant reaching and wondering slowly starts to settle. You are no longer pouring energy into uncertainty at the same level, and in that withdrawal, something stabilizes inside you. Your perception becomes clearer. You begin to see patterns without emotional distortion. You recognize where effort was one-sided, where attention was uneven, where hope filled gaps that action never truly supported. And this clarity is not harsh, it is grounding. It brings you back to yourself. You stop over-interpreting silence and start observing reality. And in that shift, your emotional dependence loosens without force. It simply fades as awareness grows. Stay here for a moment, because clarity is the first form of freedom. And finally, what this entire experience continues to reveal is a simple but powerful truth. Alignment does not need chasing, and imbalance cannot be maintained through effort alone. When something is meant to grow, it responds to presence in a mutual way, not a one-sided one. And when something is not aligned, silence becomes the clearest messenger. It shows you what words were hiding. It shows you what consistency was not confirming. And in that showing, you gain something far more valuable than uncertainty. You gain direction. You no longer have to guess where you stand. You no longer have to chase clarity from confusion. Because what is real will move with awareness and consistency, and what is not will fade without struggle. Stay grounded in that knowing, because silence was never emptiness. It was truth becoming visible.